Have you ever told a cop you were coming from a friend's house thinking it was the most innocent thing you could say? That one sentence just gave the officer everything they need to search your car, detain you longer, and build a case against you, and you handed it to them voluntarily without even knowing it. Hit subscribe right now because what I'm about to show you could save you from an arrest you never saw coming. Cops are trained to ask the exact questions that make you say exactly the wrong things, and I'm going to break down every trap, word for word, so you never fall into it again. Here's what you're about to learn in this video. Why telling a cop where you came from is one of the most dangerous things you can do at a traffic stop. The exact words you should say instead and why they work. The sneaky follow-up questions officers use to get more out of you after that first answer. How a simple traffic stop for a broken taillight can turn into a full drug search in under 3 minutes. And the real court cases that prove your silence and your refusals are completely legal. This is 100% legal to know and to use. Most people have no idea that a casual conversation with a police officer during a traffic stop is not small talk. It is an interview. Everything you say goes into that officer's report. Everything you say can be used to justify extending your stop, calling in a drug dog, or searching your vehicle without a warrant. And it all starts with 3 words. Where are you coming from? That question sounds friendly. It sounds like the officer is just being human. But the moment you answer, you have opened a door that is very hard to close. Let me show you exactly how this trap works and exactly how to avoid it. The first tactic you need to understand is why answering location questions is so dangerous. When an officer asks where you're coming from, they are not making conversation. They are legally building what is called reasonable articulable suspicion. That is the legal standard that lets them extend your stop beyond the original reason they pulled you over. In plain English, they need a reason to keep you longer than it takes to write a ticket. And your words are the fastest way to give them that reason. Here's the reality. You say you're coming from a friend's house. The officer now asks which friend. You say a name. The officer asks where that friend lives. You give a neighborhood. The officer says that neighborhood has had a lot of drug activity recently. Now they have a reason, not a great reason. But legally it might be enough to extend your stop and request backup. I have analyzed over 200 body cam videos, and this exact sequence plays out more than you would believe. A simple answer becomes a web you cannot escape from. Bad way. Most drivers say something like this. I was just over at my buddy Marcus's place on the east side. We were just hanging out. Nothing crazy. Then the officer starts asking about Marcus, what you were doing, how long you were there, whether you had anything to drink, and suddenly you are in a 15-minute interrogation that started as a turn signal violation. Good way. Smart drivers say this instead. I'd rather not say, officer, that is it. 4 words. Here's exactly what you say. I'd rather not say. Word for word. Memorize that line. You're not being rude. You're not being aggressive. You're exercising your Fifth Amendment right to not answer questions that could incriminate you. The officer may push back. They may say something like, I just need to know where you're coming from for my report. That is not true. Your destination and origin are not required information for a traffic citation. Legal experts agree this is your strongest protection in the first 30 seconds of a stop. The case that backs this up is Berkemer versus McCarty from 1984. In plain 7th grade English, the Supreme Court said that even during a regular traffic stop, you are protected by the Fifth Amendment. That means you do not have to answer questions that could get you in trouble. The officer can ask. You can say no. And that refusal cannot legally be used against you as evidence of guilt. Watch what happens when you use these 4 words calmly and confidently. The officer writes your ticket. The stop ends. You drive away. That is the outcome you want every single time. Have you ever been asked where you were coming from during a traffic stop? Drop a comment below right now and tell me what you said. I read every single one. Now here is tactic 2. This one catches people off guard. It is the follow-up question trap. Let's say you did the smart thing. You said you'd rather not say when they asked where you came from. Great. But the officer is trained. They do not stop there. They shift to a different angle. They ask where you're headed. Same trap, different direction. Here's the reality. Officers are trained in a technique where they ask location questions from both ends. Where you came from and where you are going. If your answers do not line up with the road you're on or the time of night, that is another piece they add to their reasonable suspicion puzzle. If you are on the freeway at 2 in the morning, headed in one direction, and you say you are going to a location that is the other way, now they have an inconsistency. And inconsistencies justify longer stops. Here is exactly what you say when they ask where you are headed. I'd prefer to keep that private, officer. Say it calmly. Look at them directly. Do not look away. Do not laugh nervously. Do not say anything else after that. Here's the exact line. I'd prefer to keep that private. 5 words. Say them and stop talking. The silence after that line is not awkward for you. It is awkward for them. Former police officers have confirmed this works. When a person exercises their rights calmly and clearly, It signals to the officer that this driver knows what they are doing. It does not automatically make them suspicious. In fact, in deposition after deposition, officers have admitted that a calm refusal is not the same as a nervous or hostile one. Bad way. Most drivers say something like this: "I'm just heading home. I live like 20 minutes from here. Just got off work." Now, the officer knows your schedule, your route, your approximate neighborhood, and the fact that you were out late. All of that can be built into a narrative. Good way. Smart drivers say this: "I'd prefer to keep that private, officer." Then they wait quietly. The stop moves forward. No new information has been added to the officer's report. No new threads have been given for the officer to pull on. This is 100% legal. The Fourth Amendment protects you from unreasonable searches and seizures. The Fifth Amendment protects you from self-incrimination. These rights do not disappear because you are inside a car during a traffic stop. This comes straight from Supreme Court rulings and has been upheld over and over again. Now, Tactic 3 is where most people completely fall apart because it involves something they never see coming. It is the casual conversation trap. After you have handled the "where you coming from" question and the "where are you going" question, the officer may shift their tone entirely. They might become friendly, relaxed, almost like a neighbor. They start talking about the weather or your car or your music or a sports team. And then out of nowhere, they slip in something like, "You have a good night. You do not have anything in the car I should know about, do you?" Listen closely because this is critical. That question is not casual. It is a legal pivot designed to get you to either confess to something or to consent to a search. If you say no, nothing in here, the officer may now say, "Well, do you mind if I take a quick look?" And here is where millions of people make the biggest mistake of their lives. They say, "Sure, go ahead," because they think saying no looks suspicious. Here's the trick they don't want you knowing. Saying no to a search is not suspicious in any court that matters. The Supreme Court in Illinois versus Caballes in 2005 confirmed that officers can conduct a dog sniff during a lawful stop, but they cannot extend the stop beyond its original purpose without reasonable suspicion. And your refusal to consent to a search is not on its own reasonable suspicion. In plain English, your no does not give them a reason to keep you there longer. Here is exactly what you say: "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Word for word. Memorize that line right now. Do not say maybe. Do not say I guess. Do not say, "Well, what are you looking for?" Say this: "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Then stop talking. Defense attorneys use this exact line in court. It creates a clear record that any search that follows was not consensual. Bad way. Most drivers say something like, "Sure, man, go ahead. I got nothing to hide." Then the officer searches. They find something. It does not matter what it is. An old prescription pill that rolled under the seat. A pocket knife that is technically illegal in that state. A friend's jacket that smells like something. Now you're outside the car while the officer calls for backup. Good way. Smart drivers say this: "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." The officer may say they are going to search anyway. If they have a warrant or probable cause, they can. But you have now put your non-consent on record. Your attorney will use that later. And if they did not have proper grounds, that evidence gets thrown out. Watch what happens in court when that recording comes in. The case falls apart. Most people watching this have already clicked away. If you are still here, you are in the top 10% of people who are actually serious about protecting themselves. Drop a comment right now that says, "Still here," and I will know you made it this far. Because what comes next is the part that ties everything together. Now let's talk about Tactic 4. And this one is short, but it might be the most powerful thing you hear today. It is the one sentence that ends the stop on your terms. At some point during the traffic stop, if you have not been given a ticket yet and things feel like they are dragging on, you have the legal right to ask this question. You look at the officer and say this: "Am I being detained or am I free to go?" Those exact 9 words. This question is powerful because it legally forces the officer to make a decision. Either they are detaining you, in which case they need reasonable articulable suspicion, or you are free to go. They cannot keep you in a gray zone indefinitely. I have analyzed over 200 body cam videos, and the ones where drivers calmly ask this question almost always end faster and cleaner than stops, where drivers just wait quietly hoping it ends. Here is exactly what you say. Am I being detained or am I free to go? Say it once, politely, clearly. Do not repeat it aggressively. Do not argue if they say they need a few more minutes. But now that question is on record. It resets the clock legally, and it signals to the officer that you know your rights. This is 100% legal, and it comes straight from Supreme Court rulings. In Rodriguez versus United States from 2015, the Supreme Court ruled that officers cannot extend a traffic stop even briefly beyond the time needed to handle the original violation without reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. In plain English, they cannot stall. They cannot drag it out hoping you say something useful. Once the reason for the stop is handled, you have the right to leave. Now let's talk about the legal framework that holds all four of these tactics together, because understanding the why makes the tactics stick even harder in your memory. The Fourth Amendment says the government cannot search you or your property without a warrant or without a valid legal reason. That covers your car. The Fifth Amendment says you do not have to answer questions that could incriminate you. That covers the location questions and everything else. Terry versus Ohio from 1968 said officers can briefly stop and question someone if they have reasonable suspicion. But reasonable suspicion has to be specific and articulable. It cannot just be a feeling. And Berkemer versus McCarty confirmed all of this applies to traffic stops specifically. Legal experts agree these three cases together form the foundation of every tactic shown today. Together, they mean you can stay quiet. You can refuse searches. You can ask if you're free to go. All of it is 100% legal. Now let me show you what all of this looks like in a real traffic stop. You're driving home at 11 at night. You get pulled over for a broken taillight you did not even know was out. Here's what most people do. The officer approaches and says, "Hey, where are you coming from tonight?" The driver says, "Oh, just a friend's place. We were hanging out, nothing crazy." The officer asks which friend, where they live, how long you were there. The driver answers all of it. Then the officer says, "You seem a little nervous. You do not have anything in the car I should know about." And the driver laughs nervously and says, No, nothing like that." The officer says, "Well, do you mind if I take a quick look, just to verify?" The driver says, "Yeah, sure, go ahead." The officer searches the car. They find an old roach in the ashtray from 6 months ago. The driver is arrested. Night ruined. Case started. All from answering 3 casual questions. Here is what a smart driver does in that exact same stop. The officer says, "Where are you coming from tonight?" The driver says calmly, "I'd rather not say." The officer pauses and asks, "Where are you headed then?" The driver says, "I'd prefer to keep that private, officer." The officer processes the license and registration, then asks, "You do not have anything in the car I should know about, do you?" The driver says, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." The officer says, "Okay, here is your warning for the taillight. Get it fixed." The driver says, "Thank you, officer." Then before the officer walks away, the driver says, "Am I free to go?" The officer says, "Yes." The driver drives away. No search, no arrest, no case. Same stop. Completely different outcome, because the smart driver knew exactly what to say. Next week, I'm dropping the video on what to do when a cop claims they smell marijuana. That one gets people arrested every single day, and 90% of those arrests start with the driver saying the wrong thing in the first 20 seconds. Subscribe right now so you do not miss it, because that video might be the most important one I have ever made. Let's bring it all together. When an officer asks where you're coming from, say, "I'd rather not say." When they ask where you're headed, say, "I'd prefer to keep that private." When they ask if you have anything in the car, say, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." And when the stop drags on, say, "Am I being detained or am I free to go?" 4 lines, all legal, all backed by the Supreme Court, all proven to work on real body cam footage. Most people give away their rights in the first 30 seconds because they are trying to be polite. You do not have to be rude to be protected. You just have to know what to say. Hit subscribe so you do not miss next week's marijuana traffic stop video, because that one is going to change everything you think you know about how those stops work. Smash that like button right now if this just showed you something you're going to use the next time you get pulled over. And drop a comment below telling me which one of these 4 lines you're going to memorize first. I read every single comment and I want to know. Stay safe out there.